TIFU by accidentally starting a huge argument at my best friend's wedding by revealing a secret no one knew. It all started innocently enough. My best friend, let's call her Sarah, was getting married. We'd been friends since childhood, and I had always known that this day would eventually come. She found her soulmate, Tom, and the wedding was shaping up to be absolutely perfect. The venue was beautiful, the flowers were gorgeous, and I had even managed to snag the coveted role of maid of honor. I had been looking forward to this wedding for months, no, years. I had helped with the planning, picked out the dress, and even made sure her nerves were calm in the days leading up to the event. But as the wedding day finally arrived, I didn't realize I was about to make the most colossal mistake of my life. The ceremony went smoothly. Sarah looked radiant, and Tom looked like the happiest man on the planet. There were vows exchanged, tears shed, and moments that made everyone in the room feel like they were part of something magical. I was on cloud 9 for my best friend. But things took a sudden turn at the reception. I had been giving my maid of honor speech for about 5 minutes when I made a joke that, in hindsight, was incredibly misplaced. I had been trying to break the tension, lighten the mood, and make people laugh, but I didn't realize the weight of the words that were about to come out of my mouth. In the middle of my speech, I mentioned how Sarah and Tom had been so perfect for each other, it almost made me wonder if they were secretly in love with each other all along. I had meant it as a funny, light-hearted remark. After all, Sarah and Tom had been friends before they started dating, so I thought I was just pointing out how their relationship had evolved from friendship to love. But what I didn't know was that Sarah's family had no idea about something incredibly important. Sarah and Tom had been secretly dating for a full year before they made it public. At this point in the speech, everyone in the room, except for Sarah's immediate family, knew about their long-standing relationship. It wasn't like they had been hiding it, but they were just private people who had kept things to themselves for a while. Sarah's family had always been a bit overbearing, and she didn't want to deal with their judgment. The awkwardness in the air hit me immediately after I said the words. The silence in the room felt like it was stretching out forever. But then, Sarah's mother, who had been sitting in the front row, stood up, looking furious. "What do you mean by that?" she demanded, her voice sharp and trembling. I was instantly confused. "What do you mean?" I asked. I was just trying to be funny. Sarah and Tom have known each other forever. But her mother was not having any of it. "You had no right to bring that up," she snapped. "This is supposed to be a day of celebration, not one for airing dirty laundry." I had no idea what was going on. My mind was racing. Had I really said something that upset her? I looked over at Sarah, hoping she'd step in and calm things down, but instead, her face was pale, and her eyes were wide with horror. She wasn't crying, but her entire posture seemed to shift. She looked betrayed. That's when it hit me, I had made a huge mistake. Before I could even open my mouth to apologize, Sarah's father stood up as well. "You need to leave," he said coldly. "You've ruined this entire day." The entire room was watching now. I could feel every single eye on me, and I knew I had to fix this before things escalated further. But no matter how hard I tried to explain, the more I spoke, the angrier Sarah's family became. They started shouting at me, and the once joyful reception had now turned into a chaotic scene of arguments. At that moment, Tom stepped forward, looking completely exhausted. "Sarah, please, let's just talk about this later," he said, trying to calm his new wife down. But Sarah was shaking her head, her eyes welling up with tears. "I can't believe you did that," she said, her voice cracking. "I trusted you with everything, and you," she choked on her words, her emotions overwhelming her. I felt like I had been slapped in the face. Sarah was devastated, and the entire wedding party was now in disarray. I had no idea how to make this right. The speech that was supposed to be the highlight of the evening had turned into the worst moment of my life. I was escorted out of the reception, and I didn't even get a chance to apologize to Sarah before I was shoved into a cab. I was in shock. I kept thinking about all the ways I could have handled it differently, how I could have been more sensitive to Sarah's wishes. But in the end, I had ruined the most important day of my best friend's life. I felt like an absolute failure. The next few days were a blur. I reached out to Sarah countless times, but she didn't respond to my messages. I tried calling, but she blocked my number. It was like she completely shut me out. I felt like I had lost not just a friend, but a sister. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Sarah. She explained in the letter that she had been holding on to this secret for a long time, and that she and Tom had only just recently felt comfortable enough to tell people about their relationship. The reason they had kept it a secret was because her family had always been very strict and judgmental about her dating choices. They didn't approve of Tom at first, and they had even tried to set her up with other men in the past. Sarah admitted that she had been hurt by the way I handled things at the wedding, but that she understood I hadn't meant to cause any harm. She wrote that she needed time to process everything, and that she wasn't sure how to move forward. It's been over a year since the wedding, and things still aren't the same between Sarah and me. We've exchanged a few texts, but the distance between us is palpable. I still feel horrible about what happened, and I've realized that some things, like secrets, should never be brought into the open, especially not in front of an audience. It's a lesson I'll never forget. So yeah, that's how I ruined my best friend's wedding. If there's anything to take away from this, it's that you should never, under any circumstances, bring up things that aren't yours to share, especially at a wedding. I don't know if Sarah and I will ever go back to how we were, but I just hope that one day she'll forgive me. TLDR, I accidentally revealed a secret about my best friend's relationship at her wedding, causing a huge argument and ruining her special day. I'm still trying to mend things, but it's been tough. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. So, this happened last weekend, and I still can't stop cringing whenever I think about it. The worst part is that it wasn't just a small mistake, it was a series of dumb choices that led to one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. To give you some context, I'm not really the type to screw up in front of people. I'm a pretty calm, collected person who usually handles social situations with ease. But this was one of those times where everything that could go wrong, did. It all started with a friend of mine, Jake, who invited me to a backyard barbecue. Now, Jake and I have been friends for a few years, but I wouldn't exactly call us close. We hang out every now and then, usually in group settings, but never one-on-one. I thought it would be nice to catch up, so I agreed to go. Plus, the promise of free food and drinks is always enough to get me to say yes. I should have known things were going to take a weird turn when I showed up at his house. Jake's place is in a pretty upscale neighborhood, and his backyard is practically a resort. I'm talking an in-ground pool, a hot tub, an outdoor kitchen with a full bar, the works. It's the kind of place where you can tell that a lot of money goes into upkeep, and I immediately felt out of my element. I walked through the gate, and the first thing I noticed was that Jake wasn't anywhere to be seen. Instead, there was a bunch of people I didn't know standing around, talking and drinking. I recognized a few faces from high school, but we weren't close. I'm not great in social settings to begin with, so I decided to just stand by the snacks table and act like I knew what I was doing. At some point, I overheard a conversation about the highlight of the night, which turned out to be a custom cocktail Jake had hired a mixologist to make for the party. The guy was apparently a professional bartender who was known for creating these elaborate, crazy drinks that were supposed to taste amazing and look even better. Naturally, I was intrigued. I mean, who wouldn't be curious about a cocktail that's the highlight of the whole barbecue? As the night wore on, more and more people gathered around the bar area where the mixologist was working. I thought, what the hell, I might as well get in on this. So, I walked over to the crowd, trying to appear casual, and waited for my turn. The mixologist was an older guy, probably in his late 40s, but he had this air of confidence about him. He looked like he knew exactly what he was doing. When it was my turn, I told him I wanted something strong, something to knock me out for the night. I figured I'd take advantage of the fancy cocktails and get a little tipsy, so why not go for something with a punch? He smiled and said, "I've got just the thing for you." He then proceeded to make a drink that looked like it was straight out of a science fiction movie. It had layers of different colors, floating ice cubes, and even a little smoke coming out of the top. He added some kind of sparkler to it, which made the whole thing look like it was about to explode. Now, at this point, I should have probably asked what was in it, but I didn't. I was too distracted by how cool it looked, and honestly, I was too eager to try something new. The mixologist handed me the drink with a flourish and said, "Enjoy." I thanked him and took a sip. It hit me immediately. I can't even begin to describe what was in that drink. It was like a combination of high-proof alcohol, something fruity, and, this is going to sound weird, a hint of jalapeno? I honestly don't know. All I know is that it burned. It burned in a way that wasn't just on the throat, but all the way down to my stomach. My immediate reaction was to cough, no, more like choke, but I managed to catch myself. I tried to play it cool, but the drink was really kicking my ass. I could feel the heat in my chest, and I looked around to see if anyone else was reacting the same way. But no, everyone else was enjoying their drinks, laughing, and chatting like nothing was wrong. So, of course, I felt the pressure to tough it out. I didn't want to look like a lightweight or a fool in front of people I barely knew. So, I kept drinking it. Big mistake. The more I drank, the worse it got. By the time I finished half of the cocktail, my head started to spin. Not in the fun, tipsy way, but in a dizzy, I might pass out way. The back of my throat was on fire, and I felt like I was about to explode. But I didn't want to seem weak, so I kept the charade going. The next thing I remember is that I suddenly felt incredibly warm. I'm talking sweaty palms, face red, stomach churning, the whole works. I made a beeline for the bathroom, praying I wasn't about to puke in front of everyone. As soon as I walked inside, I locked the door and leaned over the sink, trying to keep myself together. But the thing is, the bathroom wasn't exactly private. The window was open, and the light from the backyard illuminated the whole space. That's when I heard it. People outside were starting to get concerned because I had been in the bathroom for a while. One of them even knocked on the door, asking if I was okay. At that point, I was completely panicking. I knew I was about to vomit, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I don't even know how it happened, but the next thing I knew, I was on my hands and knees, emptying my stomach into the sink. What made it worse was that my loud, violent heaving could be heard from the backyard. One by one, the partygoers gathered around the bathroom door. And I could hear Jake's voice above everyone else's, asking if I was all right. I'll spare you the details, but let's just say I didn't exactly handle things with grace. After I finished vomiting, I tried to stand up, but I was so dizzy that I stumbled. I hit my head against the counter, and the sound echoed through the bathroom. I had no idea how long I was in there, but when I finally managed to stand up, I realized that the entire party was now looking at me through the window. To make matters even worse, my phone had slipped out of my pocket and into the toilet while I was puking. I immediately apologized to Jake and his friends, but I couldn't make eye contact with anyone. I felt like I had completely ruined the night. I don't know how, but I managed to sneak out of the bathroom and leave without causing a bigger scene. It was an absolute disaster. To this day, I've never lived it down. Jake still messages me memes about that time I nearly died from a fancy cocktail and sends pictures of my phone, which somehow ended up in a trash bag the next morning. I've since sworn off any drink that looks like it came out of a mad scientist's lab, and I always ask what's in my drinks now. Moral of the story: if someone offers you a drink that looks too good to be true, it probably is. Don't be me. don't drink whatever that was. TIFU by trying to impress my friends with my cooking skills, and almost burning down my apartment. So, a little context here, I'm a fairly decent cook, or at least I like to think so. I'm not a Michelin star chef or anything, but I can follow a recipe, and I've made some pretty decent meals in the past. Recently, my friends and I were planning a little get-together, and I thought, hey, this is my moment to shine. I'll cook for everyone and show off my culinary skills. My friends are pretty easygoing, so I figured it would be a fun evening. I had no idea that my attempt to impress them would turn into the biggest disaster of my life. The plan was simple. I decided to make a 3-course meal, a nice starter, a fancy main course, and a dessert that would wow them. I was feeling confident because I had been practicing some recipes, and I had everything planned out meticulously. I even went as far as watching a couple of cooking videos online just to make sure I was fully prepared. For the starter, I decided on bruschetta with fresh tomatoes, garlic, basil, and a drizzle of balsamic glaze. Simple, elegant, and quick. The main course was going to be a beef tenderloin roast with roasted vegetables, something that seemed fancy but wasn't too complicated. And for dessert, I thought I'd go all out with a homemade chocolate soufflé. It was a bold choice, but I was feeling adventurous. I started off early, around 3 p.m., because I wanted to make sure everything was prepped and cooked to perfection. The plan was to have everything ready by 6 p.m., right when my friends were supposed to arrive. Everything was going smoothly at first. I chopped the tomatoes and garlic for the bruschetta, prepared the balsamic glaze, and set the bread aside. I had a little music going in the background, and I was feeling like a professional chef in my kitchen. The main course was up next. I seasoned the beef tenderloin perfectly, salt, pepper, some garlic powder, and a little olive oil. I preheated the oven, just like the recipe instructed, and seared the beef in a hot pan before transferring it to the oven to finish cooking. Everything was going according to plan. And then it was time for the soufflé. Now, I'll admit, this was the part one was the most nervous about. I had only made soufflé once before, and it didn't turn out great. But I watched a few more tutorials, and I was feeling pretty good about it. I carefully measured out all the ingredients, chocolate, butter, eggs, sugar, and a dash of vanilla, and started the process. As I was whipping the egg whites, I was thinking, this is going to be amazing. My friends are going to love me. Now, here's where things started to go downhill. The beef in the oven was cooking away, and I was so focused on the soufflé that I lost track of time. The timer on the oven went off, but instead of pulling the beef out like I should have, I kept working on the soufflé, thinking I had a few more minutes. When I finally remembered the beef, I rushed over to the oven, opened the door, and was hit with a wave of smoke. I immediately panicked. The roast was completely overcooked, and the kitchen was filled with smoke. I grabbed the beef out of the oven as quickly as I could and turned off the heat, but the damage was already done. The beef was so dry that it looked like it belonged in a dog's bowl, not a dinner plate. The vegetables, which were supposed to be roasted to perfection, were now blackened and charred beyond recognition. But I wasn't about to give up. I figured I could salvage this. I pulled the beef apart, trimmed off the burnt parts, and tried to present it as best as I could. It wasn't great, but I could at least make it look somewhat edible. I then turned my attention to the soufflé. I opened the oven door, and the second I looked inside, I realized I had made a critical mistake. I had left the oven too hot. The soufflés had risen, yes, but they were also cracking and had a weird, overcooked texture. They didn't look anything like the fluffy, delicate soufflés I had seen in the videos. They looked more like deflated pancakes with a touch of chocolate. At this point, I could already hear my friends texting me, saying they were on their way, so I panicked even more. My beautiful dinner was falling apart. I needed a solution. I decided to take the soufflés out of the oven and hope for the best. I was going to serve them with some whipped cream and pretend they were intentionally rustic. But when I tried to take them out of the ramekins, disaster struck. The soufflés stuck. The sides were so overcooked that they had bonded with the ceramic, and no amount of careful maneuvering would get them out. I tried to scrape them out with a spoon, but that only made everything worse. Now I had chocolate soufflé mush in the ramekins and a mess of crumbs all over the counter. I was running out of time. My friends would be here in less than an hour, and I still had nothing to serve them. So, in desperation, I took all the burnt food off the counter, threw it in the trash, and decided I'd just have to order takeout. I called my usual pizza place, explained the situation, without getting into too much detail, and ordered 3 large pizzas to be delivered to my apartment. When my friends arrived, they were shocked by the state of my kitchen. The counters were covered in food debris, the oven still smelled like burnt beef, and I was standing there with a look of defeat on my face. I told them everything that had happened, and they couldn't help but laugh. One of them even took a picture of the half-burnt beef and sent it to a group chat with the caption, "When your friend tries to cook." To their credit, they were all super understanding. They didn't care that I had tried and failed. They were just happy to hang out and enjoy the pizza. We spent the evening eating pizza, making jokes about my cooking disaster, and generally having a good time. Looking back, it's kind of funny now, but in the moment, I was mortified. My confidence as a cook was shattered, and I learned a valuable lesson that night. Cooking for a group of people is not the time to try new, complicated recipes unless you're absolutely sure you can pull it off. Needless to say, I'm sticking to simple recipes from now on, at least until I regain my cooking mojo. So, yeah, TIFU by thinking I could impress my friends with a fancy homemade meal, and instead, I nearly burned down my kitchen and ended up serving them pizza. I've been friends with Kyle since elementary school. We did everything together: sports, video games, school projects, and even a stint working at the same fast food joint in high school. We've been through thick and thin, and while our lives have taken different paths over the years, we've kept in touch. Kyle's always been the more adventurous one. He moved to another city for college, ended up with a great job in tech, and recently settled down with his girlfriend, Emily. He had this way of making everything seem effortless. As for me, I stayed in our hometown and worked a desk job in customer support. Nothing fancy, but it paid the bills. We still hung out, grabbed drinks on the weekends, and stayed up late talking about random stuff. Now, a few months ago, Kyle started getting a little more distant. It wasn't anything major at first, just him getting busy with work, new responsibilities, the usual adult stuff. But over time, I noticed he seemed different. He was more stressed, talking less about the fun stuff, and focusing more on his job. At first, I chalked it up to typical work pressure, but then he started mentioning his coworkers in a way that made me feel like something was off. He'd complain about one of his team members not pulling their weight or how his boss kept putting him on difficult projects with tight deadlines. One time, he even mentioned that his manager, Greg, was a micromanager and how it made the workplace unbearable. I didn't think too much of it at first because I was used to Kyle ranting about his work. I just listened and gave my usual advice: "It'll get better, man. Keep your head down." About a week later, Kyle told me that he was being considered for a promotion. I was pumped for him. This was a big deal. He had been at the company for several years now, and he was doing well. The promotion would have been a huge step up for him in his career, and he was cautiously optimistic about it. However, the way he talked about it had changed slightly. He sounded nervous. I tried to reassure him that he deserved it, but he shrugged it off, saying, "Yeah, I hope so. But it's all up in the air with Greg being the final decision-maker." I told him not to stress, but honestly, I didn't think Greg was a big deal. Just another corporate guy doing his job. Fast forward to a few weeks later, and Kyle drops a bombshell. He calls me one night, clearly upset. "Dude, I'm screwed," he says. "I think I'm going to get fired." I was stunned. Kyle had always been one of the most reliable and dedicated people I knew. "What do you mean, man?" I asked, trying to keep calm. "What happened?" Apparently, Kyle had a major blow-up with Greg at work. He'd been putting in long hours and staying late to meet deadlines, but Greg had been constantly breathing down his neck, nitpicking even the smallest details. This had been going on for weeks, and it had started to take a toll on Kyle's mental health. Finally, Kyle snapped during a meeting and said something he shouldn't have. "You can't micromanage me like this. I'm not a kid. I'm doing my job." From what he told me, Greg wasn't exactly known for being the most understanding guy, and the whole situation escalated. It ended with Kyle storming out of the meeting. That night, Kyle went home feeling like he'd ruined everything. The next morning, he got a message from HR saying that they needed to talk about an incident. He told me he was sure it was over. But then something strange happened. Greg pulled him aside and apologized, claiming that the situation had been misunderstood. Greg told him he had too much on his plate and didn't realize how it was affecting Kyle. For a moment, Kyle felt relieved. Maybe things would blow over. But he was wrong. 3 days later, Kyle was called into a meeting with HR. They told him that, after reviewing everything, they were concerned about his behavior and decided to let him go. No warning. No second chances. Just a swift exit from the company he had worked so hard for. Kyle was blindsided, devastated, and honestly, I was too. He had given everything to that job, and they just threw him out like it was nothing. The worst part? He found out later that Greg had been behind the decision. It wasn't the first time Greg had pulled strings to get rid of employees he didn't like, but Kyle had no way of proving it. He just couldn't believe it. I tried to be there for Kyle in the aftermath, but things only seemed to get worse. He couldn't find another job for months, and the stress took a real toll on him. Emily was supportive, but I could tell she was frustrated too. Kyle had always been the breadwinner in their relationship, and now he was struggling to even get an interview. I couldn't help but feel like I was partly responsible for his downfall. After all, I had been the one who listened to him complain about Greg all those times. I had no idea it was escalating into something that could cost him his career. I should have said something. I should have told him to be more careful or pushed him to confront Greg earlier. Instead, I just let him vent and shrugged it off like it was nothing. But the worst part came a few weeks ago, when Kyle confided in me something I hadn't realized. He told me that he had heard through the grapevine that Greg had been actively working to make sure Kyle's career was ruined. Apparently, Greg had been telling other managers in the company that Kyle was a problem employee and that his temper was a liability. And somehow, despite Kyle's years of dedication, this smear campaign worked. Greg had made sure Kyle's promotion never happened, and now, he had made sure Kyle was out of the company entirely. I was livid. It wasn't just the fact that Kyle lost his job. It was that Greg had actively sabotaged him, and I hadn't seen it coming. Kyle's been doing better now. He found a new job a couple of months ago, thankfully in a much healthier work environment, but the damage done by Greg and the company is still there. Kyle's confidence is shattered, and he still feels the sting of being thrown under the bus by someone he trusted. And me? I can't shake the feeling that if I had just been a better friend, maybe things would have turned out differently for him. Maybe I could have helped him avoid this mess. Looking back, I realized just how naive I was about the whole situation. I didn't take his complaints seriously enough, and I didn't see the bigger picture. I should have noticed the red flags, but instead, I just let him vent without offering real help. I think that's the hardest part, knowing I could have done more but didn't. Now, every time I think about how things went down, I feel this weight on my chest. I ruined his life without even realizing it. TLDR, I accidentally got my best friend fired by brushing off his workplace problems, not realizing that his boss was actively sabotaging him, and now he's struggling to recover. I feel like I played a huge role in ruining his career and didn't notice it until it was too late. TIFU by trying to impress my girlfriend with my cooking skills, only to burn down my kitchen and end up in the ER. So, this all started about a month ago. My girlfriend, Sarah, and I had been dating for about 6 months. We were doing well, and things were getting serious. One of the things she always told me she loved was when I cooked for her. She said it was a small but meaningful gesture. Up until that point, I had mostly stuck to easy stuff like pasta, sandwiches, and, in my more ambitious moments, frozen pizza. But after hearing that for the 100th time, I decided it was time to step up my game. I was going to cook her the best homemade meal ever. I wanted to impress her. I didn't know much about cooking, but how hard could it be? I'd seen cooking shows. I had Google. How difficult could it really be to make something fancy? I thought to myself, I'll make a steak dinner with sides. A full meal. She'll love it. And because I'm not a complete idiot, I knew I needed to start with the steak. After all, if I messed up the main dish, everything else would be a disaster. The last thing I wanted was for Sarah to think I couldn't even make a good steak. I researched some recipes and found one that sounded straightforward enough: a seared steak with roasted vegetables on the side. Simple, right? I made a list of ingredients and went to the store to pick everything up. I got fancy cuts of steak, a bunch of fresh vegetables, a bottle of wine, for elevating the meal, of course, and some garlic butter for flavor. As I walked out of the store, I was feeling like a top-tier chef, convinced that Sarah would be amazed at my culinary prowess. When I got home, I immediately began prepping. I seasoned the steaks like the recipe said, cut up the vegetables, and even prepared a little garlic butter to melt on top of the steak once it was cooked. I felt confident. I thought, I've got this. The recipe was pretty clear on how to cook the steak: sear it in a hot pan, then finish it in the oven for a few minutes. How hard could that be? I preheated the oven, put the pan on the stove, and cranked the heat. The pan was sizzling as I placed the steaks in, and I was feeling proud of myself. The steaks were searing beautifully. This was going to be perfect. I added a little butter, some garlic, and a sprig of rosemary for that extra touch. I even took a photo to send to my friends, bragging about how I was basically Gordon Ramsay at this point. Here's where things started to go off the rails. I wanted to get the steaks to the perfect medium rare, so I set a timer to remind myself to check on them after a few minutes. But instead of checking the steaks after the timer went off, I decided to pop open the bottle of wine. I thought it would be a nice touch to have a glass while I cooked, maybe a little chef vibe going on. I poured myself a glass and took a sip. This was a mistake. I got distracted by the wine, and when I checked the steaks, they were a little more done than I intended. Not enough to be ruined, but definitely more medium than medium rare. No big deal, I thought, and I moved them to the oven to finish cooking. I had read online that you can just throw the pan in the oven after searing for perfect results. Easy. That's when my absolute failure began. As the steaks were in the oven, I started working on the vegetables. I chopped them up and put them in the roasting pan, tossing them in olive oil and seasoning. The recipe called for them to roast for about 25 minutes. At this point, I thought, great, I'm on a roll. Everything's going according to plan. Then, the first sign of disaster struck: a faint smell of something burning. I assumed it was just the butter from the steaks, so I ignored it. But the smell only got worse. Much worse. I rushed over to the oven and opened the door, immediately assaulted by a wave of heat and the distinct smell of burning food. I glanced at the steaks and saw smoke billowing from the pan. I yanked them out of the oven, but by then, it was too late. The garlic butter had ignited, and the whole pan was a flaming mess. I tried to act quickly, grabbing the pan handle and trying to figure out how to put out the fire, but I froze for a second. The flames were bigger than I expected, and my kitchen was now filled with smoke. In a panic, I did what any reasonable person would do: I grabbed the nearest towel and started flailing it around, hoping to somehow smother the fire. This, as it turns out, is a great way to make things worse. The towel caught fire almost immediately, and I dropped it on the counter, where it started smoldering and smoking like a small inferno. At this point, I was having a full-on meltdown. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from the kitchen cabinet. Thankfully, I had one, but in my panic, I pulled the wrong pin. I was frantically spraying it everywhere, but nothing was happening. The fire was still spreading. That's when I realized I had no idea how to handle an actual kitchen fire. In desperation, I ran outside to my phone and called 911. The operator on the other end asked what the emergency was, and I blurted out, "My kitchen is on fire. I was trying to cook for my girlfriend and now everything is burning." The 911 dispatcher calmly told me to stay on the line while I evacuated, which I did, standing outside in the cold like a complete idiot while the fire department arrived minutes later. They managed to put out the flames, but not without leaving my kitchen a smoldering disaster. The steaks? Ruined. The vegetables? Completely charred. My kitchen? A wreck. Sarah showed up shortly after the fire department had cleared out. She'd been out running errands and was concerned when she got a text from me saying, "There's a fire in the kitchen, don't come inside yet." When she walked in, she immediately started laughing, though it was more nervous laughter than anything else. I was standing in front of the burnt remains of my once ambitious dinner, and I had to explain what happened. To make things worse, I had to go to the emergency room to get my hand checked out. I had burned it while trying to grab the flaming towel. Nothing too serious, just some first-degree burns, but it definitely added to the overall humiliation. Sarah stayed with me at the hospital, and we spent the rest of the night eating fast food. She was sweet about it and kept telling me it was okay, but I knew I had failed spectacularly. In the end, my cooking attempt didn't impress her. It traumatized me and caused a lot of damage. If there's a lesson here, it's that sometimes sticking to the basics is the best plan. Or, maybe learn how to properly put out a fire before trying to cook a fancy meal. So yeah, that's how I managed to almost burn down my kitchen and end up in the ER in the name of romance. Never again will I try to be a chef. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Japanese to impress my girlfriend's dad. So this actually happened a few months ago, and it's haunted me ever since. For context, I, 28M, have been dating my girlfriend Aiko, 26F, for over a year. She's amazing, funny, smart, grounded, and totally out of my league. She's Japanese American and grew up bilingual. Her parents are immigrants from Japan, and her dad, Hiroshi, is a stern, quiet guy who still has a heavy accent despite living in the States for decades. He's not unfriendly, but definitely intimidating. The first time I met him, he shook my hand for half a second and then just stared at me for what felt like hours while I tried to fill the silence with small talk about weather and sports. It didn't go well. So naturally, when Aiko invited me to her family's Lunar New Year celebration, yes, I know it's not a traditional Japanese holiday, but her extended family kind of makes it a Pan-Asian thing, I panicked. I didn't want to be that boyfriend who just smiled and nodded and butchered names. I decided, in the stupidest move of my adult life, to lean into the fact that I'd taken 2 semesters of Japanese in college and brush up before the party. Maybe even impress Hiroshi a little. Except, brushing up turned into full-on hubris. I started watching Japanese YouTubers, listening to anime with the subtitles off, and even downloaded Duolingo again. After about 3 weeks of this, I could confidently introduce myself, order sushi, and insult someone's mother using phrases I picked up from some NSFW manga. I thought I was ready. I even rehearsed a few compliments for Hiroshi about his home and family. I memorized them phonetically and practiced them until I could say them without stammering. The party rolls around. It's a full house, uncles, cousins, aunts, and grandparents. I wear a clean button-down and even bring a bottle of expensive sake as a gift. Aiko's mom is sweet and welcoming, and Aiko keeps shooting me encouraging glances. Then Hiroshi comes out from the kitchen. He's wearing a traditional haori and looks even more serious than usual. I bow slightly, say konnichiwa, Hiroshi-san. Ojama shimasu, which basically means hello, sorry for intruding, a polite Japanese greeting when entering someone's home. He raises an eyebrow, clearly surprised. Then I decide to go full throttle and launch into the next line I'd rehearsed for days. anata no uchi wa totomo utsukushi desu. Which means, or is supposed to mean, your home is very beautiful. Except, I didn't say that. I'll spare you the katakana, but what came out of my mouth, thanks to one mangled syllable and bad intonation, was closer to, your wife is extremely delicious. Dead silence. Aiko freezes mid-sip of her drink. Her mom turns beet red. One of her uncles snorts loudly and chokes on a shrimp. Hiroshi stares at me with a mix of horror and fury I didn't think humanly possible. I panic. Sweat starts to pool in places I didn't know could sweat. My fight-or-flight instincts do the worst thing imaginable. I keep speaking. I try to backtrack, apologize, and explain myself in Japanese. What I meant to say was, gomen nasai makagamashita, meaning sorry, I made a mistake. But instead, in my panic, I blurt out, gomen nasai, watashi wa baka nagaijin desu. Translation, I'm sorry, I'm a stupid foreigner. That one landed too well. The laughter starts first from one cousin, then the whole room. Even Aiko doubles over. The uncle who choked on the shrimp is wiping tears from his eyes. Hiroshi, however, is not laughing. He gets up slowly, walks over to me, stares down at me, and says, in the most perfect English I've ever heard him speak, you don't need to try so hard. Just be yourself. Then he pats my shoulder once, turns around, and walks off. I'm standing there, halfway bowed, wishing the floor would swallow me whole. Later that night, Aiko told me Hiroshi had actually liked that I made the effort, even if I royally screwed it up. Apparently, nobody had ever tried to speak to him in Japanese outside their family before, and the fact that I even tried, despite embarrassing myself on a Shakespearean level, actually warmed him up to me. Still, the phrase your wife is delicious will haunt me until I die. And yes, I'm still dating Aiko. But she will never, ever let me forget this. Every now and then, when we're out and I order sushi, she'll lean in and whisper, Totomo oishi, ni, and then burst into laughter while I die a little inside. I've deleted all my language apps. I'm sticking to English from now on. TIFU by accidentally catfishing my boss on a dating app and getting a promotion out of it, so this happened about 2 months ago, but it's still spiraling and I'm not sure how to stop it without detonating my entire life and possibly a small to medium-sized regional office. I, 29 work in a mid-sized marketing agency. Not a massive company, but large enough that you don't know everyone unless you've been there a decade. I've been with them about 3 years and work in the design team. My direct boss, let's call her Carol, is a sharp, driven woman in her late 30s who oversees our entire creative department. She's respected, not particularly friendly, and always looks like she's 5 seconds away from firing someone. Now, for context, I'm single. And bored. So one night I was messing around on a dating app, you can guess which one, swiping, judging, questioning my life choices, etc. After about 20 minutes I got the bright idea to create a parody profile just for laughs. The idea was simple, make a profile as Tyler, a cliché gym bro who uses phrases like work hard, play harder, whose interests include protein powder and finance podcasts he doesn't understand. I slapped together some stock model photos, bad, I know, and made the bio a nightmare of douchebaggery. It was meant to be ridiculous and clearly fake. Think, looking for a woman who can deadlift me emotionally. Just absurd. Then I started swiping. I wasn't trying to catfish anyone for real, I just wanted to see how many people would match with a walking cliché. I'd send goofy messages like you ever feel like pre-workout replaced love, and laugh to myself like an idiot. A few days into this idiotic experiment, Tyler matches with a woman named Elle, I won't say her full name for obvious reasons, and we start chatting. She's smart, sarcastic, and honestly playing along way better than most. We trade jokes, drop pseudo-intellectual takes on books we're pretending to have read, and it becomes the highlight of my day. The whole thing is still under the funny bit umbrella, but I find myself looking forward to her messages. One night she says, "You're actually funny, for a finance bro with a vape addiction." I reply something dumb about crypto regrets, and she asks if I want to move the convo to text. At this point, I know I should stop. But I'm already in too deep, so I give her a Google Voice number. We keep texting. Every day. For a week. Now, here's where the panic starts. She sends a selfie. And it's Carol. My boss. I nearly dropped my phone into the toilet. I stared at the photo like it was going to morph into someone else if I just blinked hard enough. But no, it was her. Same smirk she gives when a pitch goes well. Same necklace she wears every Thursday for some reason. Even the background looked vaguely like her office. I freak out. I stop responding for 2 days. She sends a message like, "Guess I scared you off," followed by a gif of a raccoon with a broken heart. I want to die. Now I'm stuck in a vortex of shame and poor decisions. I can't ghost her, she's literally my boss. But if I admit who I am, I'm dead professionally. I briefly consider faking my death. Then I make the worst decision of all, I start replying again, but this time with the plan of gently backing Tyler out of her life. I tell her Tyler's moving to Singapore for a new job. She's disappointed but wishes him well. I think it's over. It's not. 2 weeks later, Carol calls me into her office. She closes the door and says, "I want to offer you a promotion. Senior designer. We're restructuring, and I think you'd be a great fit to lead the new product branding team." I blink. This is completely out of the blue. I've been solid at my job, but not exactly gunning for leadership. I accept, obviously, while trying to look surprised and not like I'm being promoted because I'm her fake soulmate. A few days after that, she starts acting warmer. We talk more. She laughs at my jokes in meetings. I catch her smiling at me for no reason. I want to disappear into drywall. Then, last week, we had a team happy hour. I somehow end up sitting next to her. She's had a drink or two, leans over, and says, "You know, you remind me of someone." My soul leaves my body. I ask, "Oh yeah? Who?" She pauses. "Just someone I used to talk to." I laugh nervously. She adds, "He was a lot, but he made me laugh. And then he ghosted me." Typical. I mumble something about people being cowards, and she looks me dead in the eye and says, "You wouldn't do that though. You're honest." I wish I could tell you that was the moment I confessed. I didn't. I smiled like a liar and changed the subject. And now I live in fear. Every day, I sit at my new desk, closer to her office now, and wait for the hammer to drop. I keep imagining she's going to piece it together, maybe reverse image search the stock photos, maybe hear me say something too Tylerish. My coworkers think I got promoted because I finally stepped up. One of them even asked if I was dating Carol. I nearly choked on my LaCroix. I can't quit, because I actually like the job. And I can't come clean, because how do you even explain that? Sorry Carol, I was emotionally catfishing you for memes, but then I caught feelings and now I'm running your flagship product line. That's not a conversation that ends well. So yeah. That's how I ended up catfishing my boss, getting a raise, and living in a constant state of anxiety-fueled excellence. Thanks for reading. I'll see myself out. TIFU. By not realizing my webcam was on during a sick day from work. This happened a few months ago, but I still get sweaty every time I think about it. For context, I work in IT at a mid-size company. Most of my work can be done remotely, so we've been a hybrid office ever since the pandemic. Our company uses Zoom for everything. Meetings, stand-ups, even one-on-ones. You get the idea. I'm generally pretty reliable, but I'd had a rough week. There were a few long nights working on server migrations, and I was totally burned out by Thursday. So, I decided to take Friday off. I didn't lie exactly. I just told my boss I wasn't feeling well. It was true, in the spiritual sense. I had no actual illness, unless you count being dead inside from fixing the same ticket for the 12th time. So, Friday rolls around and I plan my perfect lazy day. I shut off Slack, said an out-of-office reply, and turned off notifications for Zoom. I was going to have a full day of doing absolutely nothing. The kind of day where you wear pajama pants until bedtime, eat cereal from the box, and go down YouTube rabbit holes until your soul floats away. One of my guilty pleasures when I'm alone is playing this janky old VR game called Waifu Fight 3000. It's basically an anime-style fighting game with ridiculous physics and, let's just say, questionable character designs. It's not that bad, but it's not something I want my coworkers, or anyone, really, to know I enjoy. Especially because the VR headset mic picks up your voice, and the game's announcer screams lines like Kawaii KO, and Love Strike mode engaged, at full volume. So there I am, standing in my living room in boxers and a hoodie, wildly swinging at invisible anime girls and yelling stuff like no, no. Use the heart blast. Heart blast, while my cat watches me like I've lost my mind. The game is peaking in its absurdity when suddenly, I hear a familiar voice say, Jason? I rip off my headset. I think maybe it was coming from the hallway, maybe my neighbor or something. Nope. It was coming from my laptop. More accurately, from Zoom. That's when I saw it. My laptop, perched on my desk behind me, screen open, Zoom call in full bloom, with at least 12 faces staring back at me in stunned silence. Let me break it down. Apparently, the monthly all-hands meeting had been moved from Thursday to Friday. My boss forgot to mention it when I said I was sick. My Google Calendar, synced to my work account, still had the invite. And Zoom, the traitor, auto-launched when it noticed a meeting was starting. It opened in the background, webcam on by default, and mic live because I hadn't updated my privacy settings. So for what I estimate was a solid 4 minutes, my entire department, and the CTO, watched me fighting imaginary anime women while screaming nonsense in a robe, surrounded by cereal bowls and an open bag of Doritos. You could clearly see the game in the background on the TV, in all its tacky, pixelated glory. Then the worst part happened. Someone, I think from HR, snorted and said, "Is this like performance art?" I panicked. I slammed the laptop shut without saying a word, and just sat on the floor in silence. I contemplated disappearing. Not like quitting the job, I mean faking my death and starting a new life in the Yukon. About an hour later, I got a Slack from my manager that just said, "Hope you feel better soon. Also, I recommend checking your Zoom settings." No mention of what happened. Not even a joke. That was somehow worse. I considered pretending like nothing had happened. But come Monday, I was greeted with a few too many smirks and a couple people who refused to make eye contact with me at all. One guy in DevOps just said, "Hey, Jason, heart blast, right?" and I knew I was done. Since then, it's become kind of an unspoken thing. Like an office myth. People don't bring it up, but occasionally I'll hear someone giggle during a meeting and whisper kawaii mode under their breath. I've since disabled auto-join for meetings, changed all my camera/mic defaults, and put a post-it note over my webcam when not in use. Also, I deleted Waifu Fight 3000. Then reinstalled it later under a different Steam name. Lesson learned: if you're going to fake a sick day, don't battle anime waifus near an internet-connected device. Or at least close your laptop lid. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by accidentally joining a cult because of a girl I met at the dog park. Let me preface this by saying that I'm not usually the type to get swept up in weird stuff. I'm a 28-year-old software developer, I spend most of my time at home, I drink the same protein shake every morning, and I'm a proud introvert. But sometimes, life throws a beautiful woman into your path, and your brain takes a vacation. So about 6 weeks ago, I was at the dog park with my lab, Moose. He's a big dopey sweetheart who thinks every living thing wants to be his best friend. He ran up to this girl sitting on a bench with a golden retriever, and before I could call him back, Moose had plopped his enormous butt down beside her like he'd known her forever. She laughed. I apologized. She said, "No worries, he's adorable," and that was that. We talked for over an hour. Her name was Mariah, and she had this calm, almost serene energy that made you feel like the world was less terrible than it actually is. She asked me about my work, my hobbies, my childhood, and even though I'm usually awkward around new people, she made conversation feel easy. Eventually, she asked if I wanted to come to a community night that she was hosting with some friends. "It's nothing formal," she said. "Just a group of people who care about mindfulness, self-growth, and healing from the garbage of modern life." Okay, red flag in hindsight, but in the moment I thought, hot girl, dogs, and people who like being introspective? Count me in. The gathering was in a big cabin-style house on the edge of town. It smelled like sandalwood and lemon balm. People were sitting cross-legged in a big circle when I arrived. I expected guitars and maybe some vegan brownies. Instead, someone was chanting. Mariah greeted me with a hug, barefoot, wearing a long white robe. That should have been my second red flag, but I told myself, relax, maybe it's like a spiritual thing. People do weird stuff in LA all the time. We sat. Someone handed me a turmeric drink that tasted like earthy hot garbage, but I drank it because everyone else did. A woman named Willow started guiding us through what she called emotional detachment breathing. I didn't know what that meant, but I took it as deep breathing to calm the mind. Then came the release. We were instructed to scream. Loudly. From the soul. People were wailing like they'd just been exorcised. I shouted once, mostly to blend in. Mariah looked at me and smiled like she was proud of me. Afterwards, someone played a didgeridoo while another person painted what I swear looked like an abstract portrait of Jeff Bezos with goat legs. Still, I thought, this is weird, but maybe it's good to get out of my comfort zone. After the session, Mariah pulled me aside. She said she felt a deep vibrational resonance between us. I had no clue what that meant, but she kissed me, and I suddenly didn't care. Over the next few weeks, I got more involved. There were morning group meditations, sound cleansing, and weekly mirror soul reflections where you stare into someone's eyes until one of you starts crying. I always cried. I don't know why. Mariah and I started spending more time together. She was sweet, passionate, and genuinely seemed to care about the world. But things started getting intense. She invited me to a private elevation weekend. This required signing a waiver and agreeing to temporary communication fasting, which meant no phones. The waiver was 4 pages of vague statements like, "I understand that my spirit may leave its physical shell temporarily, and I accept the shared responsibility of unlocking planetary resonance." I was hesitant, but she looked at me with those deep, honey brown eyes and said, "Trust is the root of transformation." And because I'm a moron, I said yes. It was held in a secluded lodge in the woods, complete with candlelit pathways and a giant carved crystal in the main room. There were 23 people, all dressed in the same loose white robes. Mine didn't fit and made me look like a confused druid. The elevation process began with fasting. No food for 36 hours. Then came the awakening tea, which I now strongly suspect was some kind of hallucinogen. Everyone started swaying and humming. I saw a guy named Indigo climb a tree and start howling at the sky. I tried to back out. I told Mariah I wasn't feeling well. She said, "This is your ego resisting transformation. Don't run from your higher self." I ran anyway. I bolted into the woods like a man fleeing a Scooby-Doo villain, wearing nothing but my robe and my Crocs. No phone. No wallet. Just pure, unfiltered panic. I eventually found a road and flagged down a guy in a pickup truck, who took one look at me and asked, you one of those mushroom cult weirdos from the lodge? I didn't even have the strength to deny it. I just nodded. He gave me a ride back to town, and I crashed at a friend's place. I blocked Mariah's number. She sent me a letter a week later, a physical letter, who even does that, saying she forgave me and hoped I'd one day complete my cosmic metamorphosis. My dog still perks up every time he sees a blonde woman at the park, probably hoping to find Mariah again. As for me, I've reevaluated some things. I've deleted every dating app. I now have a healthy skepticism of any gathering that includes the words intentional community. And I've started seeing a therapist. Not because I think I was brainwashed or anything, just to understand why I kept going back even after the group scream. Also, I still don't know what emotional detachment breathing is, but sometimes when I get stressed, I do it anyway. Old habits die hard. Moose seems unbothered by the whole ordeal. But every time he sees a candle, he barks. TIFU by pretending to be fluent in Spanish to impress my girlfriend's family. So, this happened about 2 weeks ago, and I'm just now crawling out from under the emotional rubble to share it with the world. My girlfriend, Camila, is Mexican-American and speaks fluent Spanish. She's always encouraged me to learn, and I've picked up a few words and phrases from her and from Duolingo. I figured I was doing pretty well. You know, I can order tacos, ask where the bathroom is, and confidently say El gato está en la biblioteca. Basic survival stuff. Anyway, we've been dating for about a year and a half, and she decided it was time for me to meet her extended family. Not just her parents, who already liked me, but her entire extended family. A massive Sunday cookout with aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, and enough food to feed a small country. I was nervous, but determined to make a good impression. A week before the gathering, I got what I now realize was the dumbest idea I've ever had. I would pretend to be fluent in Spanish to impress everyone. Camila had mentioned that most of her family spoke English, but they were more comfortable in Spanish, and I thought I could score major points by showing them how dedicated I was to their culture. Camila asked if I needed help practicing anything, and like a moron, I told her, "Nah, I got this." Spoiler, I did not got this. The day of the cookout arrives. I show up with a fresh haircut, wearing a guayabera shirt I ordered online, and armed with what I thought was enough Spanish to charm everyone. Camila gives me a kiss and squeezes my hand as we walk into her grandmother's backyard, which is filled with people laughing, grilling, playing music, and speaking rapid-fire Spanish that I could barely process. We make the rounds, and I greet everyone with a confident hola, mucho gusto. So far, so good. People smile and nod. I think I'm killing it. Then someone asks me a question in Spanish. I panic. I don't even know what they said, but I nod like I totally understood and respond with a cheerful sí, por supuesto. This becomes my default answer to everything. People would say things to me, and I'd just smile, laugh if they laughed, and say sí, or exactamente, like I was in on the joke. I thought I was pulling it off. Then things started going downhill. Camila's T.O., a big, jolly guy named Jorge, handed me a beer and said something that ended in "Te gusta?" I assumed he was asking if I liked the beer, so I said "Sí, me gusta mucho." He laughed and clapped me on the back. Cool. But then he launched into a full conversation, and I caught maybe 5% of it. I nodded, said claro, and he got this huge grin and yelled for a bunch of people to come over. I'm now surrounded by a half-dozen relatives, and Jorge repeats whatever he said. Everyone's looking at me expectantly. I freeze. Camila is on the other side of the yard talking to her cousins. I can't bail. I just smile, raise my beer, and say, "Salud," thinking that might be a good segue. Jorge bursts out laughing and says something like "Lu gusta el perico," which gets everyone laughing. Someone hands me a tiny rolled-up napkin like it's a joke prop, and I nervously laugh and pocket it. Later, I learn that perico is a slang term for cocaine in some regions. Apparently, Jorge had jokingly asked me if I liked cocaine. and I enthusiastically said yes. It gets worse. Later in the evening, Camila's abuela pulls me aside and starts talking very sweetly in Spanish. I pick out a few words like novia, futuro, and familia. I assume she's giving me some grandmotherly blessing or advice about treating Camila well. So I respond with what I think is the Spanish equivalent of thank you. I love her very much and I'm so happy to be here. What I actually said, according to Camila later, was closer to, thank you, I love your daughter very sexually and the house is full of cheese. Apparently, I'd mixed up querer and amar, and used sexual as an adjective for love, plus threw in queso instead of gente. I have no idea how that happened. Abuela's face went blank. She nodded slowly, then wandered off. I thought she was just touched by my sentiment. The final straw came during dinner, when Camila's younger cousin, maybe 12 years old, started teasing me about my Spanish. He asked me to say a tongue twister. I tried, butchered it horribly, and he started giggling. I tried again, slower, and apparently said something obscene involving a donkey and a shoelace. The whole table roared with laughter. Camila leaned over and asked, "Are you sure you know what you're saying?" That's when I broke down and admitted I didn't really speak Spanish. The whole table went silent. Then Jorge started laughing again. "We knew it," he shouted. Apparently, they'd all figured it out early on and had been testing me to see how far I'd go. The Perico question had been a setup. The kid's tongue twister was a trap. I had fallen for all of it. To their credit, no one was mean. They thought it. TIFU by accidentally leading my entire office to believe I was dying, so this actually started about a month ago, but the real blow-up happened this past week, and I'm still reeling from the whole ordeal. For context, I work in a medium-sized office, about 50 people, and while I'm not the most social butterfly, I'm generally liked and keep a low profile. I also have a dry, sarcastic sense of humor that sometimes doesn't translate well, which will become relevant in a minute. About a month ago, I started experiencing weird health symptoms. Fatigue, joint pain, weird rashes, random fevers. I felt like I was falling apart. After dragging myself to the doctor and undergoing what felt like a blood sacrifice worth of tests, I was told I might have an autoimmune disorder, but they weren't sure which one yet. They said it could be lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, or something more obscure. They were still ruling things out. Naturally, I was freaked out. Not because of any specific diagnosis, but because "we don't know yet" is the most terrifying sentence when it comes to your health. At the same time, I didn't want to make a big deal of it at work. But I did start missing time, doctor's appointments, being too exhausted to come in, etc. My manager asked if everything was okay, and I told her I was undergoing tests for a chronic condition. She was incredibly sympathetic and said to let her know if I needed anything. Now here's where the TIFU starts. There's this woman in my office, Carol, who I like but who also has a habit of dramatizing. She heard through the grapevine that I was dealing with a chronic illness, and at lunch one day, asked me point blank what was going on. I was tired, frustrated, and not in the mood, so I tried to deflect with sarcasm. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe it's something cool like fatal werewolf disease. Maybe I've got 3 months to live. Guess we'll find out." She laughed. I thought we were good. She was not good. Because Carol, bless her dramatic soul, went back to her desk and started telling people I had a terminal illness. I didn't know this was happening. All I knew was that over the next couple of weeks, more people started being really nice to me. Like, uncomfortably nice. People who never talked to me were stopping by my desk with coffee. One guy even gave me his parking spot just because. I thought maybe everyone was just being kind in general. Then I got called into a meeting with HR. They gently asked how I was doing. I said I was hanging in there, just tired. Then they said they were sorry to hear about my diagnosis, and if there was anything they could do to make my final months more comfortable, I should let them know. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. They did not laugh. I asked, "Wait, what do you think I have?" The HR woman looked uncomfortable and said, "We heard, you're terminal. That you're going through treatment." I had to explain, in the most awkward conversation of my life, that no, I was not dying, and the only treatment I was getting was iron supplements and antihistamines while the doctors figured out if I just had a weird version of lupus or maybe nothing at all. Turns out Carol had told everyone that I had a rare, incurable blood disorder. Not just our team, but other departments. She even told the guy from IT who works remotely and lives in another state. People had been whispering about me for weeks, trying to figure out how to approach me. Some thought I didn't want to talk about it and were giving me space. Others were waiting for a good moment to say goodbye. One person even started planning a fundraiser. I tried to do damage control, but the story had gotten so out of hand that some people literally didn't believe me when I said I wasn't dying. "Are you sure?" one woman asked. "You look really pale." "Yes, Karen. That's called fluorescent lighting and seasonal depression." To make matters worse, one of the junior analysts had written a post about me on LinkedIn. It was one of those dramatic, corporate inspirational posts. Something like, "Today I learned that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's a quiet colleague showing up, doing their work, and fighting a terminal illness with grace." I'm honored to share a workplace with heroes like my full name. It had over 300 likes before I even saw it. I had to call him and gently explain that I was not, in fact, dying. He was horrified. Took the post down immediately, but the damage was done. People had screenshotted it. My boss then decided the only way to truly clear things up was to call an all-hands meeting. She didn't name me directly, but said, "There's been a misunderstanding about an employee's health, and while we appreciate everyone's concern and compassion, we ask that people avoid jumping to conclusions or sharing unverified information." Everyone knew it was about me. Since then, things have gone from people treating me like I was made of glass to treating me like I'm radioactive. No one knows how to talk to me. People apologize every time they say anything remotely dark or medical related. Someone sneezed near me and said, "Oh God, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to expose you to anything." Like I'm a bubble boy. I wish I could say it ended there. But last Friday, the office admin, who missed the meeting, brought in cupcakes with little ribbons on them. I asked what the occasion was. She said, "It's for your fight. Carol said today marks 1 month since your diagnosis and we should celebrate your strength." I stared at her. Then I stared at Carol. Carol looked so proud of herself, I almost didn't have the heart to correct her. Almost. I finally stood up in front of the break room and said, "Hi. Just so everyone knows, I am not dying. I'm not even diagnosed with anything. I'm just tired and mildly allergic to life. Thank you for the cupcakes." Now I'm the cupcake guy. People still don't fully believe me. One guy whispered, "You don't have to be brave for us." I'm seriously considering faking a full recovery just to make this all stop. So yeah. I tried to make a dumb joke about werewolf disease, and now half the office thinks I'm secretly going through chemo, while the other half is afraid to even talk to me. Moral of the story: don't joke about terminal illness in front of someone who thinks Grey's Anatomy is a documentary. Send help. And maybe another cupcake. TIFU by becoming the accidental godfather of a duck cult. So this happened about 6 months ago, but the consequences are still rippling through my life like a stone skipping across the world's dumbest lake. For context, I, 29 am, moved to a more rural part of Oregon during the pandemic. I was burned out from the city grind, and working remotely made it easy to live anywhere with Wi-Fi. I found this quirky little fixer-upper with a huge overgrown backyard bordering a small creek. It was cheap because the place was borderline uninhabitable and the nearest town has a population smaller than my high school graduating class. But it was peaceful and I needed peace. Anyway, one of the unexpected perks of living out here was the wildlife. Deer would wander into my yard, there were hummingbirds everywhere, and, most notably, a bunch of ducks lived along the creek. At first I thought they were wild ducks, but it quickly became obvious they were too weird. Like, uncomfortably social. They'd come right up to me. One even tried to waddle into my kitchen when I left the back door open. My neighbor Steve, mid-60s, local conspiracy theorist, wears socks with sandals, told me they used to belong to the old lady who lived here before me. Apparently she had over 30 ducks and treated them like children. When she passed, the ducks just stayed. Now, I didn't mind them. They were kind of adorable. I started tossing them scraps of food or cracked corn. Nothing major. But apparently, ducks have memories like elephants because they started expecting meals. And not just casually. Every morning at 7 a.m., they'd gather in a semicircle on my back patio like feathery little cult members waiting for communion. This would have been fine, honestly, if I had left it there. But no. I got involved. One day, I found an injured duck near the creek. It had some kind of gnarly wound on its leg. I couldn't just leave it there. So I did what any reasonable idiot would do. I built a tiny duck hospital in my shed. With YouTube as my guide and an embarrassing amount of trial and error, I nursed that duck, whom I named Captain Quackers, back to health. He became a sort of leader among the others. I swear I'm not imagining this, after he rejoined the flock, they started following him everywhere. And Captain Quackers in turn, started following me. Like, constantly. I couldn't go outside without being flanked like some sort of Disney princess with PTSD. Then things got weird. The ducks started bringing me things. Shiny rocks. Bits of trash. Once they presented me with a full AA battery. I don't know if they thought I needed recharging, but they left it like a tribute on my doorstep. One morning I woke up to find over 50 pine cones perfectly arranged in a spiral pattern. I was half asleep and honestly thought I'd been hexed by forest druids. But nope. Ducks. People started noticing. My neighbor Steve dubbed me the Duck Lord. I thought he was being dramatic until one afternoon a group of kids from town showed up at my property line, asking if they could see the Duck King. I told them to buzz off, but the ducks surrounded me like I was some kind of feathered Jesus and the kids screamed and ran off. That might have been the end of it, except I made the fatal error of laughing about it on Facebook. That post went viral. Not like a few likes from college friends viral. I mean tens of thousands of shares. People started showing up at my house wanting to witness the duck thing. One guy drove from Idaho and offered me $300 to let him meditate in my backyard with the flock. I said no. He left a bag of birdseed and a handwritten letter thanking me for restoring his faith in nature. Then came the bloggers. Then a documentary student from UC Berkeley. Then some lady who wanted to baptize her baby in the creek among the chosen. I kid you not. I tried to set boundaries. I put up no trespassing signs. Didn't matter. The ducks didn't respect the signs, and people followed them like it was some kind of open invitation. I stopped feeding them for a few days, hoping they'd lose interest. Instead, they got angry. One of them pooped on my doormat in a perfect circle. It looked ritualistic. Like a warning. The final straw came during a local town fair. They were doing a pet parade, and someone entered Captain Quackers. Not with me. On his own. I don't even know how they caught him. He won third place, apparently. I only found out because someone tagged me in the Facebook album, and there was my duck, my wounded, noble captain, wearing a tiny ribbon that said Most Distinguished. That night, I sat outside drinking cheap whiskey, staring at the stars and surrounded by what I can only describe as a silent duck tribunal. I asked them out loud what they wanted from me. Captain Quackers quacked once, stood up, and sat directly in my lap. I've never felt more chosen and more trapped in my life. So now I'm trying to find a duck sanctuary that will take them in. I've contacted 3, all of which laughed at me. One woman said, "We don't deal in cults." I'm still not sure if she meant the ducks or the people showing up on my property. In the meantime, I've embraced my role. I feed them once a day. I keep their water clean. I avoid the press. But sometimes I catch my own reflection in the window, a man with unshaven cheeks, wearing an old bathrobe, surrounded by worshipful ducks, and I think, this isn't the life I chose, but it's the life that chose me. I just wanted some peace and quiet. Now I have 27 ducks and a local legend status I never asked for. TIFU by sending a company-wide email that included my unfiltered thoughts about everyone. I work for a mid-sized tech firm with about 200 employees. I'm in the product management department, which means I interface with everyone: devs, sales, marketing, customer service, design, the works. A big part of my job is managing internal feedback loops and documenting feature requests. This also means I have to deal with a lot of, let's say, personality variety. About a month ago, we switched to a new internal documentation tool that integrates with Slack and email. It's supposed to make it easier to tag people, cross-reference Jira tickets, and email out meeting notes. Our CTO, in his infinite wisdom, made it mandatory that all major team updates and planning notes go through this tool. So naturally, I resisted it with the stubbornness of a boomer encountering TikTok. The way the system works is you write your draft in the tool, assign visibility groups, and then hit send to push it out. There's a preview window that simulates the email everyone will receive, and you're supposed to use it to check your formatting, tone, etc. I had been playing around with it all week, especially because I'd been frustrated with how unfiltered the feedback from different departments had been about a new product launch. Sales blamed the devs. Devs blamed design. Marketing blamed everyone. It was chaos. So in a moment of pure catharsis, I wrote a dummy version of the product update email that was never meant to see the light of day. It was just for me, like screaming into a pillow. It went something like this, paraphrased to protect the guilty thanks to sales for overselling features we never agreed to build. Shout out to Dev for spending 2 weeks debating tabs versus spaces while doing nothing. Huge kudos to design for giving us mock-ups that look like something a toddler with a crayon made. And let's not forget marketing, who launched a campaign with a broken link and a spelling error in the headline. I ended it with, looking forward to another week of absolutely everyone doing the bare minimum required to keep this ship afloat. Cheers. It felt good. It felt therapeutic. I chuckled and saved it as draft 99, do not send. But here's where things went off the rails. Later that day, my manager pinged me and asked if I had the final draft of the Q2 planning summary. It was due to be emailed out that afternoon. In my rush to meet the deadline, I opened the tool, saw draft 99 at the top of the list, and assumed it was the final version. I didn't double-check the content. I hit send. It took approximately 17 seconds before I knew something was wrong. My inbox exploded. Slack started buzzing like a hornet's nest. One coworker sent me the eyeballs emoji. Another said, "Yo, is this real?" Then my manager called me directly, which, in our culture, is basically a 911 emergency. I opened the email and my soul tried to leave my body. There it was. Every sarcastic, rage-filled comment. Every unprofessional jab. All of it. Sent not just to the product team. Not even to just the stakeholders. No, I had managed to send it to all company users. That included the CEO. That included HR. That included the interns. I had tagged names too. People's full names, next to scathing roasts. It was like I had hosted a corporate Comedy Central roast and invited everyone as the guest of honor. I stared at the screen in pure horror. My hands were shaking. I tried to recall the email. No dice. The tool doesn't support recalls. Too legacy, I guess. My boss called me again. I answered this time. He was oddly calm. "I don't know what you meant to send," he said, "but I'm guessing this wasn't it." I tried to explain. He let me finish, then sighed and said, "Okay. Don't do anything. I'll talk to HR and the exec team." I spent the next 2 hours in purgatory. People were reacting in real time. Some were angry. Others were laughing. One guy from IT made a meme of me holding a Molotov cocktail labeled "Corporate Diplomacy." Someone printed the email and taped it to the break room fridge. When I was finally called into the meeting, it was with my boss, our HR manager, and the COO. They asked me if I understood what I had done. I said yes. They asked if it was meant to be sent. I said no. Then they asked if the contents were exaggerated or if I truly felt that way. I paused. That pause was long enough for the COO to say, "Okay. So, some of it is true." To my shock, they didn't fire me. They gave me a formal warning and suspended me for a week without pay. I was told to write a company-wide apology email and was strongly advised to go through a round of corporate sensitivity training. But here's the twist. Apparently, the email touched a nerve. A lot of people agreed with parts of it. Some saw it as a much-needed reality check. Others appreciated that someone had finally called out the dysfunction. The tone? Not great. The content? Worryingly accurate. In the weeks since, things have weirdly improved. We've had more honest discussions in meetings. Sales and dev had a joint session to discuss alignment. Design has gotten more buy-in. Marketing triple checks their links now. I even got a quiet fist bump from the CTO. So yeah. I basically nuked my reputation for 48 hours, became an office meme, and got a week off, unpaid, but still. But in the end, things are slightly better because of it. Just don't be me. Don't vent in a draft on the same tool you use to send official company-wide emails. Or if you do, maybe don't title it "Do Not Send." TIFU by getting locked out of my apartment during a date, completely naked. So this happened last weekend, and I'm still recovering from the sheer humiliation of it all. For context, I, 29 live alone in a fairly quiet apartment complex. I've been single for a while, but I recently met someone, let's call her Emily, 26F, on Hinge. We hit it off instantly. Good chemistry, similar sense of humor, both foodies, and she's just cool. You know that feeling when you meet someone and it just clicks? That. We had already gone out twice. First time was drinks and small bites, second time was a walk around the art museum and some tacos. By the third date, things were clearly headed toward the let's see where the night goes territory. So I invited her over to my place for dinner. I cooked, which I actually enjoy doing, we had wine, great conversation, the whole rom-com package. Dinner leads to the couch, couch leads to kissing, and one thing leads to another, we end up in my bedroom. Things get pretty steamy. Like, sheets thrown off the bed, clothes everywhere, bodies tangled, kind of steamy. You get the picture. Anyway, after a solid hour of cardio, I get up to grab us some water. I don't bother putting anything on, we're both adults, it's my place, and hey, I figured she wouldn't mind the view. I head out to the kitchen, totally in the buff. Now here's where I majorly ***** up. My apartment has one of those doors that automatically locks when closed. And it just so happens that my apartment door is right next to the kitchen. While I'm filling 2 glasses at the sink, I hear this loud thump, the kind that makes you jump. I instinctively turn around and walk toward the sound. Turns out it was just the broom in the hallway closet that had slipped and fallen. But in my half-drunk, post-coital haze, I opened the apartment door to peek out and see what had happened, forgetting entirely that the lock is automatic. The door swings shut behind me. And I am locked out. In the hallway. With no clothes. No phone. No keys. For a second, I just stood there. Completely stunned. Brain trying to reboot. I actually tried the knob a few times like an idiot, as if maybe it would work on the third try. Nope. Locked. I'm literally standing naked in a hallway that has security cameras and is connected to a shared stairwell. And because it's late, maybe 11:45 p.m., it's dead quiet. Every sound echoes. Every creak sounds like 1,000 eyes turning toward me. I knock on the door. No response. I knock louder. Still nothing. I realize Emily must have passed out. We'd been drinking and she had mentioned she was exhausted from work. I start tapping the door in patterns. Nothing. Not even a stir. So now I'm panicking. I'm standing bare-ass in a hallway trying to figure out what the hell to do. My only options are, 1. Wait here, praying she wakes up soon. 2. Knock on a neighbor's door and ask for help. 3. Make a run for the front desk, 2 floors down. I really didn't want to knock on a neighbor's door. I don't know them well, and I did not want the first memorable interaction to be me covering my junk with my hands. So after 5 more minutes of trying to will the door open with my mind, I go for option 3. I bolt down 2 flights of stairs, hugging the wall like some kind of deranged, naked ninja. I get to the lobby, trying to stay out of view of the main security camera, which is, of course, impossible. There's no one at the front desk, it's late, and our complex isn't fancy enough to have 24/7 staff. I spot the emergency maintenance call box. It's behind glass. I consider smashing it with my fist, but remember I'm barefoot and have 0 leverage if the building sues me for damages. Luckily, there's a small shelf with community pamphlets, and I use one to wedge open the cover and hit the button. A voice comes over the speaker, maintenance. What's the issue? I press the talk button. Hi, I live in apartment 3B and I accidentally locked myself out. A pause. Then, all right, we can send someone over. Can I get your name? I tell him. He says it'll be 10 to 15 minutes. I hang up and immediately crouch in the corner like Gollum, trying to stay out of view of the security camera and praying no one walks through the lobby. 10 minutes later, the maintenance guy shows up. His name is Carl. He's maybe 60, heavy-set, thick New York accent, and he looks so done with life. He takes one look at me and just says, Jesus Christ, man. Couldn't grab a towel or something? I want to die. I say, I didn't think the door would lock. He mutters something about millennials and walks me back upstairs without saying another word. I'm walking behind him, still shielding myself like a human fig leaf, trying not to trip on the carpeted stairs. When we get to my floor, he knocks. No response. He knocks again. Louder. Emily finally opens the door, hair tousled, eyes squinty. She's wearing one of my t-shirts and looks adorably confused. Then she sees me. And the maintenance guy. And realizes what happened. Her face goes from sleepy to shocked horror in seconds. Oh my God, were you out there this whole time? I say yes. Carl hands me a courtesy towel from his cart, grunts, and walks off. I shuffle back inside, wrap myself up, and collapse on the couch. Emily is simultaneously horrified and laughing so hard she's crying. Why didn't you knock louder? I did. I thought you were in a wine coma. She ends up staying the night anyway, and we both laughed about it the next morning. But now every time I walk through the lobby, I swear I feel the security cameras judging me. And I'm probably a viral clip on someone's crazy apartment moments compilation. So yeah. TIFU by not putting pants on before investigating a noise. And yes, I now keep a spare key in a lockbox outside my door. TIFU by taking my girlfriend on a romantic weekend trip to a cabin in the woods that turned into a survival horror show a few weeks ago. I decided I wanted to do something special for my girlfriend's birthday. We've been together for 2 years, and she's always dropping hints that she wants more experiences instead of gifts. So I booked us a weekend getaway at a cozy, secluded cabin in the mountains about 3 hours from where we live. I found it on a vacation rental site with pictures of a fireplace, fairy lights on the porch, a hot tub overlooking the woods, and even a fire pit with chairs around it. It looked perfect. The day comes, and we hit the road with a trunk full of groceries, a Bluetooth speaker, a couple bottles of wine, and smugness at how wholesome and Instagrammable our weekend is about to be. When we arrived, the place looked even better than the pictures, until we got inside. That's when things started to go off script. First red flag, no cell service. I expected limited bars, but not zero. Okay, whatever. We were here to disconnect, right? Second red flag, the place was off-grid, which I knew ahead of time, but didn't fully grasp the implications of. The water was from a well pump, the electricity was solar, with a backup generator, and the toilet was composting. Again, seemed charming in theory. In practice? That toilet was a haunted bog of horrors and mystery fluids. But we were trying to be adventurous, so we laughed it off. The first night went okay, aside from discovering that the hot tub was literally a rusty, wood-fired barrel you had to light manually and fill with cold hose water. After 90 minutes of failing to get the fire going, we gave up and drank wine on the porch instead. We saw some deer. It was cute. Then came Saturday. And the thunderstorm. Around 11 a.m., clouds rolled in like they were mad at someone. A few distant rumbles, then bam, lightning, sideways rain, howling wind. We retreated inside just before the sky fully opened up. Within an hour, the solar power cut out. No lights. No fridge. No coffee maker. No fan, which was crucial because the compost toilet smell had grown stronger and more sentient overnight. I tried to start the backup generator, which was located in a shed about 30 feet from the cabin. I'm not a particularly handy person, but how hard could it be? Very, very hard. The instructions were inside a plastic sleeve nailed to the wall, written in blurry Comic Sans, as if that wasn't insulting enough. I pulled the choke, yanked the cord, heard it sputter, then die. Tried again. And again. I must have cranked that thing 40 times before giving up and returning inside, soaked and shivering. My girlfriend, bless her, tried to be encouraging. We sat in silence for a bit, watching the storm. Then the roof started leaking. A slow drip, then a patter. Right over the bed. We moved the mattress. More drips appeared. The cabin wasn't falling apart, it was melting. By nightfall, the temperature had dropped to the low 40s, and we had no heat source except the wood stove, which neither of us had any clue how to use. I managed to start a fire, but forgot to open the flue, so within minutes the entire cabin filled with smoke like a satanic fog machine. We opened the windows to let it out, which meant cold rain blew inside. At this point, everything smelled like a campfire and wet socks. We huddled under 3 layers of blankets on the couch, shivering, and ate cold granola bars for dinner. Romantic getaway, my ass. At around 2 a.m., I woke up to this weird scratching sound. I thought it was tree branches on the roof. Then it moved. Like, along the wall. Then onto the ceiling. My girlfriend sat bolt upright and whispered, "Do you hear that?" I nodded. We both froze. Then came the sound of something skittering across the floor. A raccoon? A squirrel? A demon? I had no idea. I grabbed the flashlight and slowly scanned the room. Nothing. Then we heard it again, this time from the loft above us. There shouldn't have been anything in the loft. I climbed up the ladder, heart pounding, and found a raccoon sitting on one of our grocery bags like it had just claimed squatters' rights. It hissed at me. I screamed. My girlfriend screamed. The raccoon, unfazed, knocked the bag over and bolted through a hole in the roof I hadn't noticed before. At dawn, with the storm finally tapering off, we packed everything into the car and bailed. We didn't even clean up. I wrote a polite but firm message to the host on the way home, explaining the raccoon, the generator failure, the roof leak, and the general descent into primal suffering. She responded, "Oh no. Yeah, the solar system sometimes doesn't like storms, haha. Hope you still had a magical time. Magical. Sure. If magical means wet, freezing, slightly feral, and possibly haunted. We got back to civilization, took the hottest showers known to man, and slept for 14 hours. My girlfriend, to her credit, said it was a weekend she'd never forget. At least we'll have a story, she said. And now I guess you do, too. Moral of the story: never trust a cabin described as rustic charm unless you're also bringing bear spray, backup power, and possibly an exorcist. TIFU: by accidentally sending my ex a photo of my new girlfriend in a compromising situation. So, a little backstory: my ex and I broke up about a year ago. It wasn't exactly the worst breakup in history, but it was definitely messy. We were together for 3 years, and I thought we were going to get married at one point. But things got weird. I realized she wasn't really the one for me, and, after a long period of trying to make it work, I finally broke up with her. She wasn't exactly thrilled, but we ended things on relatively decent terms, or so I thought. Fast forward to a few months ago when I met someone new. Her name is Emma, and we hit it off instantly. She's everything I wanted and more: funny, beautiful, spontaneous, and really easy to talk to. The relationship has been amazing so far, and we're very comfortable with each other. We've even been spending more and more time together, which has been great. So, last weekend, we decided to take a spontaneous trip to a cabin in the mountains for a couple of days. No phones, no distractions, just us. We had an amazing time, hiking, laughing, cooking meals together, and, well, enjoying each other's company in a way that only a quiet getaway can allow. On the second night, we got a little tipsy on wine and decided to take some intimate pictures of each other. Now, before you jump to conclusions, I want to be clear that we were both fully consensual in this, and we were in the privacy of the cabin with no one around. It was fun, romantic, and a bit playful, and we sent a couple of photos to each other later in the night. Now, the part where I messed up. The next day, I was still on a high from the weekend, and I was feeling good about life. I woke up early, decided to check my messages, and, as usual, saw a text from my ex. She's one of those people who still reaches out from time to time, even though we've been broken up for ages. She mostly asks how I'm doing, says she hopes things are good, but then quickly drops off the map. I've always answered her politely but in a friendly, nonchalant way. So, I'm sitting there, scrolling through my phone, and see that she sent me a message. I opened it up without thinking too much, thinking it would be something like, "Hey, hope you're doing well," instead of a long-winded essay, which is usually the case. I noticed something strange though: her message had a picture attached. I opened the photo, and it was a picture of a guy. She was clearly hanging out with someone new, and from the look of it, he was a lot more muscular than me. She'd written, "Hope you're happy with your life, I guess this is how things go." A little passive-aggressive, but I get it. She's probably still working through some things. I was a little annoyed, but more curious than anything. I wasn't mad at her, I was more confused because I was still in the process of getting over everything with her. But I decided it wasn't worth responding immediately. I would just let it sit and respond later when I was in a better mood. Now, here's where things really take a turn for the worse. While I was in the middle of checking my messages from my ex, Emma texted me asking what time I was planning on heading back from the trip. I was about to respond when I noticed that I had another message from my ex with an attached image. In my slightly hazy, still tipsy state from the night before, I made the catastrophic mistake of clicking the wrong conversation and accidentally sending my ex a photo I had just taken earlier in the morning with Emma. To put this into perspective, the photo I sent was not of my face, but of Emma in a very compromising position. It was one of those photos we took during our playful moments the night before. We were both fully clothed, but let's just say it was not a photo you'd want to send to your ex. It was intimate, suggestive, and definitely not something I would have ever willingly shared with her. I instantly froze in panic. I wanted to throw my phone out of the window. I immediately started typing out a message to explain that it was an accident, but then I realized that anything I typed would just make it worse. The longer I took, the more time there was for her to stew over what I had sent her. I felt like I had made a huge mistake that I couldn't undo. So, I decided to do what any rational person would do, panic. I frantically texted Emma, explaining the situation. She was understanding, but also laughing at the absurdity of it all. "At least it's not a nude," she joked. I wasn't exactly feeling relieved, though. This was embarrassing, and I wasn't sure how my ex was going to respond to it. To my surprise, she responded almost immediately. I think she was just as shocked as I was. "Wow. I didn't know you were that serious with someone new already. Good luck with that." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. I just stared at the message, feeling more and more embarrassed with every passing second. The next few hours were a blur. My phone buzzed several times with more messages from my ex. She was being surprisingly calm about it all. She asked if Emma was the one and then mentioned that she thought we might get back together at one point, but obviously that didn't happen. I was trying my best to focus on how to salvage this mess, but I was honestly so mortified that I didn't know what to say. I finally decided to respond, explaining that the photo was an accident and wasn't meant for her. I apologized for the awkwardness and told her that I hoped she was doing well. I kept it short and simple. Her reply? "I guess I should be happy for you. But yeah, that was awkward. Anyway, hope you're happy." It was still awkward, but at least she was being civil about it. She didn't give me the cold shoulder like I expected, and that was a relief. But I still couldn't shake the feeling of utter embarrassment. I ended up talking to Emma later that night, laughing about the situation. We both agreed that it was a complete mess, but at least now we had a funny story to tell our friends, well, once the embarrassment wore off. In the end, I learned that sometimes the smallest mistakes can blow up in the most ridiculous ways. I also learned that it's not a good idea to check your ex's messages while you're still in a tipsy haze after a night of wine, especially when you're trying to navigate a new relationship. At least I didn't accidentally send anything else to her, right? But hey, it could have been worse. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.